And now, well, please join me again in welcoming Brandon Cronenberg and Karim Hussain.
Hello again. Hi, everybody.
So guys, take a seat. Welcome, welcome. So, the first thing actually, because you of course talked about this before the start of Possessor, the differences between the cut and the uncut version. So usually it's just like a few scenes are dropped that are deemed offensive. But I got the gist actually that this was not the case actually. So can you talk about a little bit about the differences between the cut and the uncut version of Possessor?
Sure. I mean, the reason it's censored, there's a censored version, is because of the American MPA, as Karim mentioned. You can't, if you get an NC-17, which is their sort of higher, one of the highest ratings in the US, you can't have a proper commercial release there. You can't market the film. It's like cigarettes. You can't have a proper marketing campaign. Almost no commercial cinemas will take it, and so to be able to make any money there, you're obligated to have an R cut. So you have to go through this particularly sort of mind-fuckingly vague process with this essentially Christian conservative organization telling you what you can and can't have, and they're very, in particular, uptight about sex. So one of the things that we were told, to give you an idea, one of the notes we got back was, during the sex scene, the woman is on top for too long. You know, like it's that kind of.
Wow, that's.
Yeah, I've been told they're especially hard if you have anything resembling what they consider to be non-standard sex. They're especially hard on the film with non-standard, including women receiving oral sex. Apparently, that's considered non-standard. So they only have one rule, like as a hard rule, no hard cocks. So that's it. You can't have hard cocks. That's the only objective rule. So Andrea's hard cock, that was cut out, which was a shame because that was a major moment in the film. Everything else is just this very vague, like subjective thing where it's like it feels. It's a very weird organization. You're only allowed to be on the board if you have a kid of a certain age, and once your kid reaches 21, it's like you're no longer able to rate a film, so you have to leave the board, and it's just. Yeah, sex scenes trimmed back, of course, and violence. I mean, the stabbings were cut back. The kid's head being blown out at the end was cut back. They're very, very hard on sex, hard on violence. But if you have sex and violence, then you're just fucked. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a certain process. Possessor, we didn't have to do it. We cut it down to the point where they were into it, but they have a process called arbitration, which is basically going to court, where you have to get their equivalent of a lawyer, which is a consultant, and Brandon basically had to go to Los Angeles with Infinity Pool to kind of get the movie finally to get an R rating. And the thing is, the jury during arbitration is different from the normal one, where there's actually a member of the Christian church hidden in the jury, like a priest, basically. Of course, it'd be a man. Hidden over there, but they're an undercover priest. Like you don't know who is the priest in the jury. So you have undercover priest watching Infinity Pool, like watching these insane fucking orgies and penises ejaculating on them and everything. And, I guess the undercover priest at one point said enough, just give them their R rating.
But not after turning us. We lost the
Yeah, we did lose the arbitration.
We split we had to go, first of all, we had to go to Sherman Oaks, which, I don't, if you've been to LA, Sherman Oaks, that's already punishment enough. And then, yeah, you have to talk to everybody and the priest, and they deliberate. There was a jury. Actually, at that point, the MPA, when we had this, we tried to appeal so that we could stop cutting the film for the R version. This is a bit of I don't know if you intended this to be quite such a detour, but...
that's totally fine.
It's interesting. I spoke to members of the MPA. We had made this case for the film. It had been cut a little bit at that point, and they actually agreed with us that we had achieved an R rating. But the jury was split. The priest, I guess, talked someone into switching sides, and so if you have to get 2/3 of the jury on your side. The interesting thing that they said is that they're trying, as much as I make fun of the MPA because they drive me crazy and censor my films, they know that NC-17 in the US doesn't work, because it was originally, the idea was that you had X-rated films that had this incredible stigma, and so the NC-17 initially was designed to be a rating that would allow you to make adult films without that sort of stigma. And then immediately Warner Brothers said, oh, we'll never make an NC-17 film, and then all the studios said, yeah, we'll never do it, and then the big theater chains said, we'll never show them, and so it just became the X rating again. They know that it doesn't work, and so, you know, if these films came out 2 years from now, if they managed to make it work, they would get like a double R or whatever, which means you can play, like the idea is you could show an uncensored film like this in the US without these problems, but for now it is, yeah, really aggravating situation.
So when I first saw Possessor, I was literally blown away by the film. I really loved it very much, and I still do love it. I think the music is great. Of course, the visuals are amazing. Your work, Karim, or you know, the work of the two of you is really amazing. The gore, the special effects, and everything. But what really got me the most, I think, was that I felt that the story of the film talked really about the now. It was really something, you know, kind of like with the internet, you have a different identity. You can just like change who you are. And so I was just very interested in how did you come up with the story? How is your writing process? What was the first idea that then became Possessor?
It was my fear of doing interviews. In particular, master classes.
You're doing good.
No, it was a weird thing, because you make a movie and then suddenly everyone is like, oh, you're a director. And then you go around and, I was very fortunate to be able to travel around with my first film and to do press for it and stuff. But it's interesting because you're putting on this act, this act. Like, this is total, this is an act. If we were having a beer somewhere, I wouldn't behave like this, obviously. You have this public persona that you create. And then on top of that, there's a weird additional thing because it's filtered through the media. There are photos of you. It's weird to see yourself. And then people also make up quotes from, like, sometimes interviews are actually sort of what you said, but a lot of the time you'll read a quote from somebody. It's just invented by the journalist. Like, it's shocking if you've been on the other side of that, how often journalists will just make something up and then that's now what you said. So there was this sense of another version of myself that was like a performed version, an alternate self that was out there that I had no control over. And, but it was out, sometimes it was out there running around on its own and I didn't have control over it, or sometimes it was an active performance on my part trying to create this thing. And that sense of creating a character, this fiction, it's particular to doing a press junket that you are so conscious of that process, but I think we all do it to some degree, that I think human beings are all sort of fictional. We put on these performances for other people. This is how we interact with other people. It's always a performance. We also perform for ourselves, to a certain degree. I mean, I think we all know people who are just not self-aware, who their image of who they are is so different from who they really are in the world. And so this idea that fundamentally the human being is a fiction and a performance ended up being the start of that film.
Do the two of you, because I know that you are very close actually, and I think in close contact, so also when you're not shooting a film, do you exchange ideas? So does Brandon then call you, Karim, and I don't know, send you stuff, or do you talk about the projects even before one word is written?
Yeah, I mean, also on particularly Possessor and Infinity Pool, I was also an associate producer on those films. So I'm involved actually quite a bit more than your standard cinematographer would be involved in this kind of stuff. And Possessor, I mean, yeah, since Antiviral, since we met and began our collaboration, we've been working very closely on everything. And Brandon, contrary to a lot of directors, is really open to collaboration, and particularly with some of the core team that he works with, and it's always an open discussion, but everything always goes through the Brandon filter in the end. Like, we have a lot of stupid fucking ideas that we tend to throw his way, and Brandon is a master at taking our stupid fucking ideas and finding the one potentially good thing in that stupid fucking idea that he can then dilute and then adapt in his own manner, and then it's a million times better than anything we ever said. But
Karim's being very generous. Karim's ideas are fantastic, and Rob Cotterill, another close collaborator, producer, and first AD. I mean, we talk a lot. There's an initial idea. I'll share the script with them. We're working on the script stage. Also, Karim and I spend a lot of time experimenting with visual ideas before we lock down the look of the film. I mean, Possessor. There was an 8-year gap between my first film, Antiviral, that we also did together, and Possessor. That was just because we couldn't get the money, and it kept. There was a certain point where I think it was going into pre-production and then failing like 4 times per year. It was super aggravating. It was so hard to make it work. In that time, Karim and I got very crazy about experimenting with with visuals in Karim's living room primarily, and it was just a lot of the two of us going nuts in Karim's living room, playing with projection feedback and various lenses, using projectors on fans and all of these ideas, and it was just. It ends up being really a group effort, really a collaborative effort for everyone to bring these ideas together, and we build a kind of bank of these things over years and years and years, and that eventually evolve into the look of the film.
Yeah, I mean, I think the living room is a very important part of the process on both Possessor and Infinity Pool. In the short movie, please speak continuously and describe your experiences as they come to you. On that one, that was kind of like a test for a lot of the Possessor stuff we did just visually. And you'd be shocked in terms of running time, the sheer volume of minutes from both Possessor and Infinity Pool that were shot in my living room with just Brandon and myself rephotographing and redoing experiments that we said, why break something that works? So we carried the living room technique over to those 2 movies, and we'll probably always living room it at one point.
The thing about Karim's living room, so one of the things that we did, there was no exact overlap between the 2 films, but similar. There were variations on the techniques, and so one of the things that we did is we project the films in Karim's living room. He has a big projector, and then reshoot this footage again and again through different types of glass and diopters and lenses and stuff, and then you can get. It's all those hallucination scenes are completely practical. Like I should say, that's all in camera. There's no CGI for any of that stuff. And part of that is we project the film or the scenes in Karim's living room, rephotograph those projections with different things in front of the lens, do it again and again and again, so you can kind of jump between different layers of distortion, and that's how it gets that kind of glitching effect in a practical way. However, if you run the air conditioning in Karim's living room, it really messes with with the projector. So the last day of shooting Possessor was a 16-hour day. Me and Karim in his living room, door closed, no air conditioning, just going crazy, just like shooting again and again. Karim was on a lens baby. His hands were seizing up. He was having problems. I was like, a lot of that stuff is like Karim's on the lens baby. It's my hands, like I'm flaring, and it's just like my fingers in front of the lens. And so we're doing this thing that has been described to us by actors who've seen it as a stupid puppet show, where we're just fucking around in front of the lens. But for 16 hours, no air conditioning, middle of the summer. Right. Sweaty ass cheeks. It was really, it was really bad, man.
Yeah, and Brandon does a huge volume and pretty much all of the color puppeteering, because it's literally like puppeteering color with gels and lights. And I forget if it was on Infinity Pool or Possessor, but at one point it was so hard for Brandon's arm that all the blood was coming out of it that I had to take a broken tripod and put it underneath his arm and put a cloth on top of it so he could actually physically continue doing it. So, because, we shoot on Arri cameras. You rent it for a weekend. They're not going to give it to you for weekend number 2. So you have to do everything in one go. It's all practical. The only CGI in Possessor are like cleanup things, like cleaning up shadows from boom mics and things like that, and the virtual office. Of course, is CGI, but everything else is all 100% done in camera, including all of the transformation sequences with the melting wax dummy heads and all that. There's zero CGI in that entire sequence. It's all done with just sped up cameras and things, and there's various other tricks I suppose we'll talk about. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what I wanted to talk about, of course, obviously, I really need to ask you because I think you also have a camera or something or a lens with a fungus that you got from India, from a Bollywood.
Yes, Lucky Pierre. So Lucky Pierre is my fungal friend from France, but it's a lens. It's an original Ingenue 25 to 250 zoom lens from 1970. So it's the lens that you've seen all your favorite spaghetti westerns, giallos, crime movies from Italy were shot using this lens. It was a classic lens of the 1970s. So I found it on eBay, and the very specific thing this person said on eBay was no fungus, perfect condition. So I'm like, okay, cool. The price point was around what I could afford, and I found out that the lens was born in France, hence the name Lucky Pierre, which also has a few other meanings if you look it up. I only discovered later, so look it up. Then I got it in from this eBay thing, and they were like, yes, it's going to be perfect. And then, of course, like all good Frenchmen, Lucky Pierre went to jail before, was trapped in customs for a while. He likes anarchy, Lucky Pierre. And when I finally got him, all the years that he spent in India in very humid conditions, Lucky Pierre's ass was covered in fungus. But I figured that's interesting. And, most people would go, I'm going to complain to eBay and clean the fungus out of his ass. But actually, it gave us wonderful effects, as a real element fungus could do. And it just has a unique, very voyeuristic, very evil feeling. So it's like we don't use diffusion in front of the lens, but if something is organic, like a disease, we like to film through disease. So, so we always use Lucky Pierre. It's the only zoom lens I think we've ever used on any of the movies because we want to film through disease.
The fungus makes an appearance in Possessor, actually. There's no way or reason you would have noticed this, but there's a sort of flare on one of the shots of the building. There's this sort of rainbow flare, and you can see the fungus is like snaps into focus. There's this sort of like fungal cluster right at the bottom. So the fungus gets a cameo.
Fantastic fungi, which is really amazing. Of course, when we talk about Possessor, we also have to talk about the practical effects work. And actually, we have a 10-minute documentary on that, which I found to be very insightful and very interesting. And I hope technically, Andy, it works. Great. So please show us the documentary.
I knew that Brandon favoured practical very heavily, and I was told to read it to an eye to assume that everything was our department, that we were going to have to do everything, which was really exciting.
There are two things I really like about practical effects. The first is that I think they have a particular weight to them on screen. I'm not anti-CGI, but I think often if you lean too heavily on it and it's not rooted in something practical, it kind of feels floaty and unsatisfying in a way. And also there's a kind of tangible process with them. When you do CGI effects, you sort of tell someone what you want and there's a bit of back and forth. But when you're working with practical effects and you're involved in a hands-on way, you kind of discover things by accident and through process that you wouldn't get to otherwise.
Basically every effect in Possessor is in camera. The only CGI in Possessor is cleanup. cleaning up some wires or things like that, or little blade extensions here and there. That's it. Everything else is live and done in camera.
So what we're going to do is, this vacuum form of Chris's face has been treated to be a rear projection screen. So we're going to project Andrea screaming into the back of it, then rip a skin mask apart, revealing her screaming projected into the back of his face with a plate that we shot of an alleyway there. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Brandon always wanted very sort of stylized, representative ways of showing the experience of the Colin and Voz characters fighting for control of the body. This sort of like duality character.
The face ripping apart in the projection came from Dan because he wanted to try something like that. And that was part of what was so great about working with him, is that he has this kind of storeroom of ideas that he's always wanted to try. And he would say, well, I really want to do this and I think I can make it work. Do we have, the time to do it? And we would say, yes, that's fantastic. We've got to try it.
And then he took that idea and progressed it. So the mask that Chris wears when he's playing Colin as Voz, but represented as Colin back in control of, like, regaining control of the body. We made a version of that mask that could go onto the rear projection face and be torn away. Again, one of the several moments in the film where they're fighting for control of the body.
But we always want to step it up and do something new with techniques or ways of photographing stuff. And Dan is really open to experimentation. So that's also another one of the cool things. He doesn't want to just do all of the tried and true, normal sort of manners of doing things. He'll think of how to step it up and how to innovate, which is how I like to approach photography as well.
Did they just like rip?
Yeah, absolutely.
Full rip?
Yeah.
So same as what we've been doing, but don't stop. Just
So we did a safe version, which was the dry version. Then we did the scripted version, which is a little trickier, but we know we've got something, so then we go on to the next one. And we got that after a little while as well. And then Brandon just came over and said, would it be okay if we try? And of course it's okay, that's why I'm here. So we then absolutely tear everything apart to get an alternate version.
I think often with a fake head or some sort of effect that Dan made, you'd be able to work within certain parameters without destroying the piece. And then afterwards he would say, okay, we're never going to use this again, right? Is it okay if I just stab it really hard with a poker and rip it to shreds? And often that would be the best stuff.
That's how you come across something that maybe you hadn't predicted the puppet could do or the makeup could do. I don't know which version of the eye removal will be in the film, but I was the one stabbing his eye out. And I think I did it 50 times. We got it on like the third time, but then that puppet is like a colander now. Like there are a lot of holes in it.
Oh.
Separate life cast. One expressive, which we used to make a puppet of the character, and one passive that we sculpted prosthetics onto. So we had prosthetic versions of all of the wounds that he would suffer, and then we also made scars for the character for the aftermath. There were two different moments that were shot with that puppet. The first was the poker in the mouth, which knocks out his teeth. So we had removable teeth, which was an advance on a system I designed for the second Human Centipede film. So we got to sort of build on a teeth smashing gag that we did for that, make that a bit more robust. And then at the back of his throat, we had two lines, one for blood and one for air, so that we could have the puppet exhale through the blood. So you've got this sort of like splashy breath during that scene. And then the second moment is the poker to the eye. So we made a soft eye that was attached via a silicone and fishing line optic nerve into the back of the head, very, very soft flesh around the eye. So we take a rigid poker and we literally just dislodge the eye. But there's a bloodline at the back, so as soon as the eye starts to shift from its housing, blood is able to come around it and sort of pour out of the head. At the time it felt excessive, but with hindsight it was one of our more restrained blood gags. I think we got through about 2.5-3 gallons of blood. We went really, really over the top with how horrible that scene is, and depending on the censorship board in the country and the viewer of this, you may have seen some of the most extreme stuff, I think. We only made one of those puppets and it stood up to quite the beating. You know, on a film of this size, you can either aim for a high shooting ratio of a few gags, or you can go pedal to the metal and just be determined to get everything with one version of everything. Some things we've done multiples of. The wax melts, we've got a couple of different versions of Voz's head to melt for that. We've made thin, like hollow shell wax versions of the actors' heads, painted them all up, and we're literally just going to subject them to insane heats so they slowly break down on camera. Again, we did a load of tests, playing around with different heat locations, different orientations and so on, and we're going to show one of them melting away to nothing, and then the other one, the footage is reversed, so you see it rebuilding as that character.
Our final day of shooting, the last thing we did was we melted all the heads, so it was a big weird way to end it. I know you can't, with your face, do a pain reaction, but it's sort of a bit more body pain reaction and search around a bit longer for the shot.
The stab or with the pull apart?
The pull apart.
Okay.
The actors have been very accommodating to some of the things we put them through. You know, we try to have an eye on comfort, and obviously we're never going to endanger anyone, but at the end of the day, our main thing is to make it look amazing, and they've been very good about putting up with some of the things we've sort of stuck to them or wedged them into. Rossif Sutherland had to have his right arm tucked behind him for several days of shooting after he lost part of his right hand. We made a shoulder rig, an arm rig, that allowed us to puppeteer a fake arm on his body, and then a removable forearm section so we could put different versions of the arm on for different moments in that scene. So this was a version of the hand that was cast holding the gun. And this, I don't have it with me, but this had the other two fingers there that could be pulled away on a ripcord. But obviously he couldn't lie there with his hand in this position once the gun's been taken from him. So we also made this version, which was the passive version that he wears for the rest of the scene. We were sort of dressing a big space over 2 days, but also we don't always have the luxury of shooting chronologically, so we do have to clear away huge amounts of art. I mean, we don't. The poor people of Set Deck do, but you know, with nary a complaint. And then we have to dress it all back in again, so down goes another, you know, half gallon just to put the same pool back on the floor. Over the 2 days that fight took place, I think we ended up using about maybe 8-9 gallons of blood in total across those 2 days. There were geysers of blood on that one. That was quite excessive. Every time we get anything on camera, it's been very gratifying. We've done a lot of stuff with this amazing, like super tight macro lens, the probe that Karim brought on, which is a sort of a world class. Like it's the only lens like it in the world, and it's a very recent addition to any camera department. The lens hasn't been around for very long, and so we've been getting in closer to puppets on this than I've ever thought we were going to, and it was very nice. Mostly very nice to hear Brandon and Rob and Karim say, we were genuinely unsure as to whether we would get away with shooting stuff this close, but it looks beautiful. It looks amazing. We didn't know if that was even going to be possible. So we're getting into like the scalps of puppets to the extent that on a cinema screen, there's going to be like 2 feet between individual hairs on the scalp of these things. It's so close. But yeah, it's really, really nice to see that stuff come to light.
Okay, get that blood going. Blood town.
It's better than we don't clean it up town, right?
Yes, we don't clean it up town.
You don't want to go to You Don't Clean It Up town.
I mean, do you want to go to Blood Town as well, really? Especially since they're neighbors?
Right.
All right.
There's a lot of like-minded people. We all like the same films. We grew up on the same films.
There are a lot of genre nerds on set. And in particular, I mean, Dan, in a really extreme way, is, and also Karim Hussain, is an encyclopedia of genre knowledge. So getting those two guys in a room is hilarious and informative.
In working with other longtime cult film or genre fans, it is literally like working with family. You cut through automatically a lot of the explanation process you would have to give to other people in terms of your film references and also your technique references, where you could say, okay, so in this movie, this was done using this technique. How do we step it up? How do we do something new based on what has been done before?
We can say, you know, do you want it like this or like this, and name 2 films, and you can get an answer that tells you exactly what Brandon wants or exactly what's expected. So, like, for example, when we stab Elio in close-up, we go back in a sort of a dream sequence, we had our level, the top being Lone Wolf and Cub for the blood spray, or like, you know, Lady Slow Blood, and then something much more reserved, like I'm not going to say what we said because it's not a film reference, it's just offensive, but the gauge of blood flow could be spoken of in cinematic terms, which was really gratifying. When you hear the cut and everyone can relax, and that's when everyone's like, you hear Video Village erupt with like pleasure, like excited noises. That's the best bit, really.
Good. Lights on, please. Thank you. Join us again, Brandon. So of course Dan's the man. I got that, and I really he's now on my bucket list actually for guests for the festival.
You should,
because he seems super cool and super knowledgeable. How did you get to work with him? Did you know his work actually before you kind of like worked together and collaborated?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he does Ben Wheatley's stuff, and one of our producers, the UK producer on Possessor is Andy Stark, who's done the majority of Ben's stuff, all of his indie stuff. Possessor at a certain point was going to be set in London. We were going to shoot over there, and so we just kind of said, okay, we know Andy, we're just going to kind of take Ben's people, like just steal Ben's people, because those are great movies and great team. But then for various reasons, it gradually switched over and became a Toronto shoot. There was a weird middle ground where it was half in Toronto, and we were trying to do Toronto for London and find houses where we could address them as London. But then we did a full switch over to Toronto, but retained Dan and Jim Williams.
So is there a lot of stuff actually that you write about, or when does Dan know what he will have to do and what kind of like atrocities he will have to kind of like, come up with? Or is there a lot of stuff that's then basically just not doable? Because of course, when you talk about doing prosthetic effects, it also means it's in a way limiting. It can also be liberating, the limitation, but, do you have to kind of like just I don't know, delete stuff, or
No. I mean, I don't think there's anything that we've tried to do practically or wanted to do practically that we haven't been able to do yet. I mean, I think there's some stuff if you want to, in the world, if you want to make a dinosaur movie and have dinosaurs running around, in a wide shot, then it doesn't really work. But for our kinds of stuff, we haven't encountered anything we haven't been able to do practically. And with Dan, it's sort of, I mean, it's the same with the way that Karim and I work and my team in general. There's some stuff in the script that's like particular to the script. And then there's some stuff, especially for the hallucination scenes, that, as with Karim, it becomes this very collaborative process with Dan where we bring him on. We have ideas, he has ideas. Sometimes he's already built something for another film, or like has an idea that he never got to use and he's been desperate to try it. He'll sort of offer us a menu sometimes of things based on our discussions. We'll all be brainstorming and he'll say, okay, but you've got this much money, this much time. You can have 7 points worth of stuff. Here's like the stuff we've talked about. This is what's, there's the let's talk about everything version, and then there's the what's realistic in terms of budget and time version. But it's a mix of stuff that was already written and stuff that we've all sort of thrown in on, including Karim, including Rob, and then stuff that Dan is just like very excited about.
Yeah, I mean, we always all speak together about these grocery lists, and usually Rob, who is the adult of the bunch, he's the first AD and creative producer, he usually comes up, tells us we're insane. We say, no, Rob, we can do it. And we're able to do what we're able to do within that. It always starts like it's too much stuff and then comes down to something that's realistic. But we usually only dream of stuff that we can do practically because we know basically what is possible to be accomplished in one way or another. So if we're like, like say, for example, in Infinity Pool, and the very lists of things we can do, we're like, can we create a breast that will shit? And Dan was like, but of course we can. So those are the kinds of discussions we have.
Great. I would say let's now move on, Andy, to to Antiviral, actually. So let's start with the trailer for Antiviral. Thank you.
Fame, glamour, perfection. What if you could find it all at the tip of a needle? Here at the Lucas Clinic, we strive to bring you closer to celebrity than ever before. With samples drawn directly from the source, you can be connected in ways you never imagined.
Do you not agree that the mania surrounding celebrity is reaching an unhealthy level?
No, I don't. My clients want to feel more connected to those people that they see in the magazines and on television.
Enjoy.
So far, I've had all her diseases.
Must have been expensive.
Is there any way you can spread it?
What happened to Hannah, guys?
That's pretty shocking.
He started bleeding again.
Bleeding.
From your mouth.
I don't understand how this isn't considered cannibalism.
You've become involved in something sinister.
It's a weird business, Sid.
Forgot about the trailer for Antiviral.
Yeah, it's a good trailer, actually.
Yeah, they did a good job.
Yeah, it's very intense. Yeah. So, of course, this was your first collaboration, and I would like to go back even further and just learn a little bit about your, let's say, socialization with cinema, with films, with genre films. We just heard in the documentary before how important it also is that you work with genre enthusiasts, simply because you have a shorthand. So how did you gain all of that knowledge, or what was your pathway into cinema?
You want me to do this one first? All right. I can only remember being a horror fan. Only. I think one of the first films I saw was like Dracula, Prince of Darkness, or Horror of Dracula. I don't know which one. But on television, and my mother has always been a big horror fan and still is to this day. My grandmother is a big horror fan, and she would actually take me. I lived in a horrible place called Ottawa, don't recommend it, on the border between Quebec with a French-speaking Canada, which was a little more liberal in its censorship laws. And my grandmother would drive me from the Anglophone side of the border to the French-speaking side to see a bunch of horror movies in the 80s. So, you know, we'd go and we'd watch, like, The Fly, for example, as it came out, and we were underage, but my grandmother was like, this is amazing, you know, and I was like, this is the best movie I've ever seen. And, you know, my grandmother didn't give a shit during all the sex scenes or whatever, showing it to minors. You know, we were more into corrupting minors, I guess, with movies that in that time. You know, and I've just always been into genre films because and I always knew I was going to do this. You know, I mean, I started off directing movies, which I don't do anymore, but I was always doing the photography of the movies as well, frequently writing them, which was a terrible mistake. Sorry, audience. And you know, also involved in the production, and I even do a lot of the sound editing. Certainly, the sound editing of my first movie. You know, known in Austria as one of the only places I did the sound editing too. You know, and the picture cutting. So I just learned from doing it. I never finished high school, like a regular school for young people. I got kicked out. Because they thought I was making pornographic movies, but stupid me was making art house movies like an asshole. Because back then, that's the time pornography was making money. So I chose the path of not making money and doing art house horror movies. Yeah, I just never stopped. I mean, that first movie I did, Subconscious Cruelty, I started when I was 19 years old in the early 90s. It took 6.5 years to finish, but from that, kind of doing most of the jobs on that movie, or partially a big amount of those jobs. I also ended up involved with the programming of the Fantasia Film Festival with my friend Mitch Davis, who's still there, and various other people. So I've always been very closely involved with the genre. It's always been a thing for me. So yeah.
Just a side note, you should definitely check out at least Subconscious Cruelty by Karim. I can remember when I was around 19, I think the film came out on a DVD here in Austria in a luxurious edition, and there was already this word of mouth that this is one of, you know, of the real nasty and bizarre ones, and even dangerous ones. And it doesn't disappoint, actually. So thank you for that assault on my, you know.
Yeah, sorry, Austria.
Brent, you never need to apologize to Austria.
That's true. No, you deserve it, Austria.
Brandon, you might have maybe also had maybe a different pathway, because your father, of course, David Cronenberg, is a very successful director, and I think you also spent time on the sets of some of his films when you were younger. To you, usually maybe you kind of like have the instinct to kind of like pull away from, you know, what your parents do or what your parents are. So how was this process actually for you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up around filmmaking, so it was a bit of a different thing. But when I was younger, I never wanted to do it, and sort of, I guess because, not in my family were fine with me doing whatever, but I guess I would get people coming up to me and be like, oh, you're going to do films, right? You want to do films? And so it was delightful for me to say, no, I don't care about movies. I'm not going to do fuck this. But first of all, you know, that's a terrible reason to not do something that you're interested in. And also, I was doing all this other stuff. I was a book nerd, and I read a lot of books, and I wanted to be a writer, and I was playing in some terrible bands. I played bass guitar starting from when I was 12, and I was in all these awful bands, but wanted to do music, and I really liked drawing, and I wanted to do visual art, and there was a certain point in my early 20s when I was like 22, 23, where I was like, okay, you can't do all of this stuff. And also, it's stupid to not do movies if you want to do movies. I mean, it's an incredible art form in and of itself, but it's also a way to connect with all of these other things that I find so delicious. You know, the visual art, the writing, the music, all of that stuff is satisfying. There's a way to embrace it in one art form, but focus on one thing. You know, because I felt like the only chance I had of getting halfway decent at anything was to, at a certain point, kind of focus my energy on something.
When I knew about actually Antiviral, I just thought, wow. So Brandon Cronenberg directs a film that, at least maybe in its story, but the clinical setting, the Lucas Clinic, the medical horror is quite close to some of the aesthetic, maybe not aesthetic, but themes actually that your father did. So was this something of a war in your head actually? Do I want to go there? Because of course, comparisons, which are probably inevitable when you have the name Cronenberg, and so was this ever a concern to you? Did you ever think maybe I'm going to do, I don't know, a romantic comedy or a musical, or really some very different stuff from the work of your father?
Well, I mean, I like to say, all my films are romantic comedies.
In a way, it's
that
true.
Kind of is true. I remember saying that to a journalist when I made Antiviral, and he almost hit me in the face, but he got really mad. He was like, no, it's not funny, but it was meant to be funny. I don't know, it's two things. You can't avoid that no matter what you do. When I was doing visual art, I remember having an art show and having people come by and be like, oh, these drawings are just like his father. So I was like, okay, fuck, you can't. You can't avoid it. But also, I mean, it's a terrible, that perspective, worrying about that is a terrible place to be making art from, because whether you're actively embracing the expectations or you're actively trying to avoid them, it's completely basing your work in opposition to someone else's or in response to someone else's work, and that's what could be more boring, just for Eddie, it would be irresponsible of me to care about that and make movies about that. How self-involved could I be to fixate on that, so these movies are just honest expressions of my own interests and creative impulses. To what degree I'm a product of my environment or not, I'll leave it to other people to psychoanalyze me. But I'm just doing what I like, and other people can decide whether to care about that stuff or not. Really.
Visually, of course, Antiviral with all of this whiteness, and it's also very static camera, so there are very few, tracking shots or whatever you call it. There's the one, of course, with Caleb Landry-Jones walking in there, which is kind of like a key thing, image. But otherwise, it's quite a static film, very, very much actually in contrast to Possessor. And the two of you, of course, worked for the first time together. So I'm interested in how did you get to know each other and fall in love with each other, actually, and how did you develop the visual side, the aesthetic, actually, of Antiviral?
You want me to do this one? All right. Well, I did a movie for some producers in Toronto, Rhombus Media, who produced Antiviral, a movie called HOBO with a Shotgun. So I did that. All right. Hey, HOBO, Jason Eisner.
Yeah.
I did that I think maybe 2 years before we shot it 2 years or 1 year before we met on Antiviral, and it's really just Neve Fitchman, the producer for Rhombus, that put us together. I was still living full time in Montreal at the time, so he actually, I think, flew me over to Toronto from Montreal to meet with Brandon, which, put a lot of pressure on Brandon to hire me, because Rhombus were spending some money. It was like, all right, well, I met with Brandon, and it's obvious my life will not be the same after just simply meeting Brandon. Obviously, we're going to do this and hopefully continue. And it was just, we immediately hit it off, and basically because we have the same sense of humor. So that was really, the main thing, and a lot of the same problems in just life outside of work, and we're neighbors, and we're always watching movies together. We're just a bunch of old, schlubby, married guys who hang out in my living room and watch movies and, try to make it in the cold, cruel world that we learned from Falco and his song, how cold and cruel the world can be. It's the same in Toronto. Toronto, the Austria of Canada. So really, we just hit it off, and we were speaking about a lot of the same stuff. We developed sort of the look of Antiviral is very different from the look of the other movies. Antiviral was a specific movie. It's a fetish movie. It is in many ways, it's a fetish comedy, actually. It really is a comedy. If you analyze Antiviral, you'll see it's a dark, dark comedy. And it's sort of like the aesthetic was between a trip to the doctors and a fashion shoot, like against the white cyclorama. And it's fetishization of disease. And in many ways, I think what's interesting about Antiviral is it makes people feel better about disease, because subconsciously, you see all these famous celebrities have these diseases that can be stigmatized in society, and that people can think, this is a bad thing, but actually these are the stars. People want this disease. People think this is a beautiful thing. And when you're talking about certain diseases that most of the population actually have dormant in their bodies, that comes out occasionally, what the fuck? It's just a normal thing. So why not make it beautiful? Why not say this is okay? And I know people who have certain conditions that are depicted in Antiviral, and they literally say the movie made themselves feel better after watching it. So I think we sort of did our job, except for the sneeze fetishists. We had problems with the sneeze fetishists.
Yeah, that was really a sad moment for us, the sneeze fetishists. We had, so there are sneeze fetishists, I'm sure.
What does it actually mean?
A fetish for sneezes, they get aroused by sneezing. Yeah, and it's a very, it's very...
So not by their own sneezes, but by sneezes from other people?
Yeah, both, kind of. And
both,
they make themselves sneeze, and in movies, there were, and there was this whole thing with the movie Contagion that was coming out at the time, because there was a sneeze fetish forum, and they were saying, I don't know, like, am I going to be able to see Contagion with my family? Is it going to be too sexy for me, And then there was this one post that we were obsessed with, where someone said, knowing Hollywood, they'll take all the sneezes out anyways. And they did. It was just a coughing movie. There was no sneezing at all.
No sneeze.
So the thing that we did, we like esoteric fetishes. You know, we're not really making fun of these people. It's sort of fantastic. We love fetish communities. We love, you know, people with these kinds of esoteric, you know, fetishes. It's fantastic to us. So we really actually appreciated the sneeze community. We weren't, you know, it wasn't mockery. We were like, wow, this is great. So for us to make up for, you know, Hollywood's lack of sneezes, we thought we would do a sneeze in the film, like we would have a real unsimulated sneeze. And so we had this model in one of the ads. We got her to sneeze, and so she tickled her nose, and then we shot it in slow motion, and it was this what we thought was a great erotic sneeze. And it was we were just trying to show appreciation, you know. It wasn't. We were just like, here, and hopefully that went over well. And then years later, we were like, oh yeah, I wonder if anybody actually saw that. And we checked back on the Sneeze Fetish Forum, and they hated us. They were like, first of all, we had mentioned them in the commentary, and they were like, we all feel exposed now. Like, these guys have like talked to. We weren't mocking them, but you know, they were like, I feel too revealed. I'm super anxious. And then, but the best. The best and worst thing was one of them was essentially live tweeting, watching Antiviral, and they got to the sneeze, and they were like, oh, just saw the sneeze. Like, is that it? Like that terrible sneeze. Oh, slow motion sneezes. I hate slow motion sneezes. Like, nothing erotic about that. I hope that's not the sneeze they were talking about. This is the worst sneeze I've ever. So like, we completely failed. We offended the sneeze community. We failed to arouse them. It was just a nightmare. So our you know, never try is like our new motto. Like, we will appreciate the fetish community from afar, but we're not going to try and show appreciation, because it's only going to end in tears, really. Although the tears fetish community maybe.
Yeah, I mean, let's maybe for the next door one. Here.
I would say actually that we're now going to watch, Andy, the short clip that we have from the making of Antiviral, in which also, of course, your main actor, Caleb Landry Jones, back then quite unknown, or at least not as well-known and famous as he is now. And then we're going to talk a little bit, I think, about your actors. And yeah, cool. So, Andy, bitte.
Caleb wakes up in the Possessor clinic in their unknown room, and he's surrounded by these walls of huge Hannah Geist pictures.
It's really odd to walk into a room where all four walls are your face.
Try it on your side, down.
You know, I kept my head down. My eyes closed, and I really try not to absorb any of that because it's just so bizarre.
It was a simple set. The floor was white, the walls were white, but it has such a powerful presence.
He's basically getting abused and assaulted and gets into this hallucinatory state where he wakes up and he's puking blood.
Brain.
What was interesting was the crew's reaction to the Hannah room, especially Caleb, who took to it quite amazingly. What it gave him was a lot of backdrop to act against.
Anyway, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for the way you're being treated here. Been up to me, we would have taken better care of you.
Okay, how's that?
We gotta get this thing finished and on the market while people still care, otherwise there's no point. Besides, you owe me for what you did to my rig.
performance in that scene is just riveting. I mean, he's riveting every day, but that scene was particularly special.
Sometimes some movies click. You just have a beautiful time doing something that you believe in. And Antiviral was definitely one of those movies where we all believe in the film.
Brandon's a first-time director, but to me a director is the guy who's going to lead our movie. We acquiesce to whatever his vision is.
I met Caleb yesterday for the first time when I picture wrapped on the film. He was like, "Hi, I'm Caleb." And I was like, "Hi, I'm Sarah." And it's weird. There's no other way to say it. We spent an entire film in a relationship but never knowing each other. And actually, Caleb told me yesterday that when we did our scene together in the bedroom, he's like, I had to have a drink before we shot that scene because I was really, really nervous. Weren't you? I was like, no. No, it was fine, actually. I was curious.
The alchemy of Brandon's first film and Caleb's first kind of major lead performance, and they're both so strong and they both help each other so much, that is going to kind of make it even more explosive.
Market.
I don't know how to call it.
567, take one.
Say that. 567, take one. Market. Amazing.
We have to acknowledge that he's, as a person, is well placed, having grown up in the environment that he has, and the fact that he's been on movie sets and has been surrounded by celebrities all his life. I think he's kind of a person who's well placed to make those comments. I'm sure when he discusses his film and presents it to the public, we'll have a pretty unique and interesting insight into all that. That, in combination with the film itself, I think will be pretty potent.
First-time directors you have to support and come out for, and he did such a great job with the script that I think it's going to be a really fascinating movie. I can't wait to see it.
He really directs from a place of no ego.
I hope people will see this film and think that I'm a genius. And they'd be right to think that.
That's a wrap on Antiviral.
Wow, we were young, man.
Yeah, I know. Sorry
We've aged
about
horribly, Jesus.
the awful shadow of our former selves on the stage today. Holy shit, we suck.
So, of course, Caleb Landry Jones, we just saw him in action, and he's an amazing actor. But back then, as I said before, he was not yet that famous. I think is it also his first main role or lead role?
He had a role. I mean, it was his first. I think it was his first lead, or he had done a feature before, but I think he was the antagonist in it.
So when did he come to the project? So did you cast for a long time, and then Caleb shows up, and then you say, "Oh, Caleb, it's you," or yeah, how did you find?
Yeah, it was kind of like that. I mean, it was okay. So the genesis of that film, the reason I was able to make it was because Rhombus and Neve, the producer who you saw there, they were doing a series of first-time features. And in Canada at the time, if you were an established production company, you had access to a certain amount of money that you could do what you wanted with. And they did this really cool thing, which was that they decided to spend it on a series of first features and to support new directors and so on. And so HOBO with a Shotgun was the first in that series of first films. There was another one which is now titled Treading Water. There was a title change. That was the second one. Antiviral was the third one. And so one of the weird aspects of that was that we had the financing in place because it was done through this. They already had the money. So we were in pre-production, which is very rare to not have your lead, but we didn't have our lead. We had started pre-production. We were still casting. So we had the offices open. We were making the film. And yeah, we were going through that casting process, and it was Caleb's agent said, "Look, I know this guy is a bit younger than the character," because it was written for a sort of 30-something character, and Caleb was in his early 20s. It's like, but just check him out. He had done X-Men.
X-Men,
He was a character in X-Men. It wasn't like he was Banshee in X-Men, so he had a little bit of notoriety, but it wasn't that. They showed us this indie film that he did in Texas where he played the antagonist, and also some casting videos that he had done, and we were just like, holy fuck, this guy is like amazing. Like he just has that thing, that some actors have, where it was just incredible to watch him. It was just this amazing, viscerally exciting response. Everybody in the room, I remember us all sitting around a laptop just going like, holy shit, it is worth reconceiving of this character, making this character younger. Let's just get this guy because he's great. Of course, he's a polite Texan kid, and he came up and had a glass of milk and flew to Canada and it was like, have some milk, nice to meet you. And we were like, will you do our movie? And he said yes. And so, it was really, and it was a fantastic experience working with him. I mean, we had a really great time. So that was that process.
Yeah, and the one really gets the feeling actually that the whole of the team and the crew actually were absolutely in awe of his art, and of course also obviously fans of him as a person. So for the later films actually, for Possessor and for Infinity Pool, of course, when you write a story, do you already have an actor like Andrew Riseborough in mind, or is it something that then develops at a later point?
I never write with an actor in mind because there's too much heartbreak involved. If you just can never predict who you can get, because it's actor availability, it's whether or not they want to do the movie. You get rejected most of the time. It's who has the right passport. I mean, it's a whole, when you're doing indie co-productions, it becomes this whole game of shuffling around passports. Financiers have their own, the money's dependent on getting the right cast. They have approval over at least a couple of roles. So when you're just sitting alone, not knowing where you're going to end up, you just can't predict when that constellation of forces is going to line up in the right way and make it possible to cast someone. So I never work that way. It's usually, as with Caleb, there's some actors who just have this incredibly viscerally thrilling thing to me. I think as people who watch movies, we sort of recognize that it's a hard to articulate thing, but some actors just have this thing. All of their choices are fascinating. They pop in some weird way. They're just that special actor. They come on screen, even in a supporting role, they steal the scene. They just have whatever that incendiary thing is that some actors have. And so my kind of, sort of idiotic casting process is I just want to take one of them and plug them into the character. It's not really, I'd rather adapt the character to that actor and give them the freedom to make it their own and just tap into whatever that thrilling thing is that they do, rather than lock it down so much and try to force, someone into my pre-existing vision of the character. It's almost a found art through people process,
So Antiviral, you did a few short films, I think, in film school, but Antiviral, of course, your feature film debut, and then it gets invited to, the most prestigious and definitely also the most famous film festival in the world, to the Cannes Film Festival. So what did this do to you, actually, to get this kind of like recognition? How was this journey then with Antiviral and
I mean, it was great being at Cannes. It was very exciting. I feel like maybe expectations were a little too high. I feel like the response was there was a lot of focus on that film. There was a lot of attention on that film, but it's a first film. I'm happy with it as a first film, but it's a little weirdo film, and so I think we got a lot of backlash because the expectation was so high, especially at Cannes, and then it's this weirdo film where there's no panning. It's a lot of static shots. It's a lot of talking. There's it's just a trip through a series of ideas and static frames, and then occasionally barfing blood. And again, for a first film, I'm happy with it, but I feel like probably we got kind of burned, and then I didn't make a film for 8 years after that. So.
Yeah, I think one thing to note is that the version of Antiviral that played at Cannes is different from the version that played elsewhere. It's substantially shorter. And Matt Hannum, our editor on that picture, after the premiere, he's like, I know where to cut. and he was right, as he usually is. So actually, some stuff in the trailer is actually not in the movie. Those were a part of the sequences that were removed after the Cannes screenings. I have one Blu-ray of the Cannes version, and I think it's the only available version of that movie available now. I have that Blu-ray, if you want.
It's not better, to be clear. Nobody forced me to shorten it. He was just like, my editor was just like, let's try some stuff because everyone's mad at us. And then, there's one thing that sort of didn't work, but the substantial cut, I was like, oh yeah, you're right. It's just, you lift it out and it makes it a bit better.
Yeah, the release version is definitely better, by the way.
So talking about Cannes, actually, and I now want to jump to Infinity Pool, actually, but I think you're also developing at the moment a TV series based on Super Cannes by J.G. Ballard, and actually I think maybe some of the motifs are a bit similar, of course, than also in Infinity Pool. To start this portion of the talk off, we're going to watch the trailer for your latest feature, Infinity Pool.
I don't understand why we're doing this. We barely know these people.
One day, let's mix things up a bit.
You're just happy you found your fan club. I've been waiting 6 years for your second book. Is it coming out soon?
I'm working on it.
What do you do for money then?
You married rich.
I actually came here looking for inspiration.
Mr. James Foster, you'll have to come with us.
Here, the punishment for any crime committed is death.
What did you say?
But for a significant sum, we'll build a double to send in for your execution.
Oh.
Just like me.
Maybe think of it as a gift. It's like a new skin working into place. For you to complete your transformation.
This is just a little game.
Like inject blood. Show me how strong you are. It's really disgusting. You could just sit there and watch it happen.
You know, James, do you worry they got the wrong man?
Thank you.
So that's a really bad vacation from hell, so to speak. And I read somewhere that actually you also had some very bad experiences or strange, uncanny experiences at some resorts, or at one resort maybe, holiday resort where you were, and that this was one of the main starting points actually regarding Infinity Pool.
Yeah, I mean, it actually started initially as a short story that didn't have anything to do with resorts a very long time ago is sort of when I started it. I mean, you see it in the trailer, so I don't think it's giving anything away to say there's a kind of execution where someone's watching a double of himself being executed that believes that it committed the crime that he committed. And so initially the story was just that. When I was trying to expand it into a feature, it seemed like the obvious choice was to follow characters who were able to, escape consequences for their actions. And, where do you set a story like that? A resort, it seemed to make the most sense. I did many years ago, 20 years ago, I think, or more, kind of got talked into going to one of these all-inclusive resorts, and it was a really I guess disturbing experience for me because a lot of that stuff came into the film, and it was in the Dominican Republic, and the thing is they would bus you to the resort in the middle of the night, so you wouldn't see any of the country, you wouldn't see any of the surrounding area, and they would just dump you in this resort compound, which was surrounded by fences with razor wire, so you couldn't get out and no one could get in. There was a fake town, there was a terrible disco and a Chinese restaurant and all of this stuff. There's a bunch of stuff from the film that was just straight out of that experience. And then in the day at the end of your week at this weird, horrible place, they would bus you back during the day, and you saw the surrounding area was incredibly poverty-stricken, and that contrast was obviously completely horrific, but also very surreal because you realize you never had been in the country. It was like some alternate dimension that you'd entered into, some embassy grounds for this kind of international tourist nation or something, but you hadn't seen the country. You were actually barred from seeing the country, and the country was barred from seeing you. So it was, in that way, also surreal and disturbing.
So obviously architecture plays a main part. So the places that we see, also the resort, it's brutalist architecture. And actually I think I had somebody from our team told me a very funny story that you were very much enthusiastic about the ORF-Zentrum, the TV station, radio station where you were, because it would have fit nicely actually, right? Just aesthetically into Infinity Pool.
You were talking about maybe the police station Infinity Pool would have been wonderful if it was ORF, where they torture people, they clone them, and many people scream in horror.
Well, I mean, should there ever be a sequel or anything else, of course, we would be very proud, if you would shoot at the ORF-Zentrum at the Königelberg. So one other thing actually with Infinity Pool, which I really done now, when you realize that something is an element that pops up all the time in your films, is the mask. Actually, you have it in Antiviral, of course, with these printouts, basically the face of the virus that's on these boxes. Of course, they are present in Possessor and now again here in Infinity Pool. So I would just love to hear something on that from you.
Sure. What about that? I don't know. I mean, I guess that, you sort of, in retrospect, people tell you what you're interested in when you're a filmmaker, because you're focused on film, like in an individual film, whatever's in front of you, and then someone's like, oh, somebody told me after I made Possessor, they pointed out that the chairs that they use, that the boss uses in Possessor, is exactly the same chair that the boss has in Antiviral. They're like, oh, you're obsessed with this chair. I was like, oh, fuck, I don't know. It was 8 years ago. I didn't remember that it was the same chair. It's, I guess, just a cool looking chair. But I mean, narrative filmmaking tends to be about what it is to be a human being, and my sort of sci-fi version of it, what I like about science fiction, horror, and an approach I take is to discuss that on a very fundamental level. Like, what is it just to be anyone? What is it on a basic level to be a human being? And so I think it ends up being about identity, and of course the obscuring of identity, the altering of identity is a classic masks theme. So probably that, but it's not deliberate. I guess I just like it. I don't know.
All good. So as said before, I want to circle back again, of course, on your visuals, on the camera work, especially also Infinity Pool, but of course also the other films. And to kick this off, we have the orgy scene from Infinity Pool. So we are gonna watch that now. So, what...
Now, I'm afraid to say that was the censored version of the orgy, actually.
Again.
Yeah, I'm not...
Yeah.
America strikes again, I'm sorry. But you can see it was the same... It's the same length. There were some shots we had to swap out, and for the purpose of this conversation, of course, it's the same effects, but...
Yeah, but it was the priest-approved version, actually, by the United States. So priests love that scene.
Yeah.
Not the other one, not the uncut version. But, you know, it's a good thing it's supposed to be the rapture today because priests approve of Infinity Pool.
So, of course, I mean, what does it actually say in the screenplay? Does it say orgy scene? So there's an orgy scene, and then you come up with this, or how does such a surreal sequence actually develop with all of these many elements? Some, we touched upon some of the stuff before in our talk, but elaborate even further, please.
Sure. I mean, usually in the scripts there is a paragraph that sort of says there's some sex stuff happening. It's the image deforms, flashes of nightmare imagery, whatever. There might be one or two things if there are particular details that are in it, but it's a kind of very vague paragraph, and that's code to Karim and to the rest of my team to say, look, we're going to spend a very long time experimenting together and making a kind of experimental short film. And so Karim and I, we spent a huge amount of time. Again, just collecting ideas for the visual effects, for the in-camera effects. We played with dichroic. Maybe you want to talk about
sure.
the dichroic film that we found.
Absolutely. So, in Possessor, a lot of the sequences that are red are actually lit with white light on set. So you might have seen it in a couple of the making of shots. What we did in Possessor is we wrapped a red gel that's crinkled up around the lens, a longer lens. And then Brandon, or on B camera, Ashley, our second AC, would be shining a yellow light into the red gel to create sort of yellow flares going through the gel. So all those effects are live in camera, all those color effects. And when Infinity Pool came around, we're like, well, we can't do the same thing. We got to step it up. So when Brandon was on vacation in Australia, he saw on a boat a very weird kind of window where, depending of the angle you would walk by the window, the color would change. And then more research was done, and we discovered this is a type of film never used in cinema called dichroic film, where depending on the angle you look through this gel, it looks like a gel, different colors of the spectrum will be available. So basically what we did was, for the rephotographing part, basically on set for the orgy sequence, we shot with colors changing on set, flashing lights, and live projections over the bodies. So we would take the feed from the camera and project it back onto the bodies themselves. So if somebody moved, occasionally you would see a piece of that movement becoming a projection vortex, because what happens is when you film a projected image that is coming from the same camera, it creates a vortex, multiple images. It's the same thing if you have a mirror on one side and a mirror on the other side, and you're looking and whoa, you're going through a tunnel of fun. And basically it does the same thing over there. So we were projecting onto them with the lighting changes and everything. And then afterwards, we went to the living room in one of the marathon sessions, and then Brandon took a piece of dichroic film with what is called a split field diopter, which is like kind of half a magnifying glass. They use Brian De Palma, uses them a lot to have sort of split elements. But Brandon was hand holding it to move the focal plane, where I would set the focus to either inside where the split field diopter would be, or outside of it, and move it along a long lens, in this case a Helios 44 if you're curious, and move around the focal plane while shining a light into the dichroic film. So depending on the angle that the light would go, the color would change. So this dichroic film was more sort of into the green and magenta vibe going on. And that's the whole thing. So basically we had to do it with multiple levels of dichroic film and multiple levels of intensity in every take, because it was done before the movie was edited. So a lot of the tricks in Infinity Pool are intercutting live from the camera shots with rephotographed shots, particularly in the last Farmhouse Hallucination, where it's almost like animation. There's no CGI in any of it. everything is done almost like animation with one frame subliminal edits. So Brandon and our amazing editor, James Vanderwater on Infinity Pool, were sitting there literally sculpting one frame moves this way, the next frame will move that way from various parts in the film. So it took 10 months to edit the entire movie, which is a long time. But in, I think, 2 or 3 minute, the initial hallucination sequence, the cloning sequence, I think, I don't remember how many edits there was in like 2 to 3 minutes, but it was over 300 edits in that.
Yeah, 300 something. Yeah. And I should say it's also, because Karim and I sort of were developing these techniques, and so yeah, part of it is the rephotographing. We would take a shot, unedited rushes, and shoot it 6 times, and then sync those up in the edit, so it was different layers of hallucinations. Also, Zosha McKenzie, our production designer, was very involved in she built this huge box that was a mirror box. So it's a box of mirrors that you put the actor in it. On one side, it was a 2-way mirror, so you could shoot in, see the actor, but not see the camera in the reflection. And on the other side, it was smart glass. So it was Titan tubes, was it? It was like a pinwheel of Titan tubes. So they would glow through the glass, but you couldn't see the rig that was holding them. So we could spin those. Karim devised this rig with the Hungarians, and that would spin, and so that you get this pinwheel of light that would reflect in the box and create this thing, and then we would take that footage and rephotograph it again, and then I'd go with James, and we would just spend weeks. Like, it was a totally deranged process. I don't know how he didn't kill me, but because we'd be sitting there like, all right, what if we put this frame next, and then this frame, and then, okay, what about these 3 frames? And then we'd play it, and we'd be like, what if we swap the first and second frame? Because there's this weird alchemy when you're doing this kind of subliminal, 1 frame at a time editing. Depending on the order, your brain registers certain images, and if you change the order, it registers other images. And sometimes it's out of order, so you think it's going to be the first one, but it's always the second one or the third one. And so we just spent weeks driving ourselves crazy individually, after sifting through hours and hours of footage. Karim and I shot so many hours of this hallucination footage, and then James and I just slogged through it in a basement for months and months, but it was sort of fun.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of prosthetics in that. Less in the version you saw, but there is, in the uncut version, a sequence of, say, a penis growing out of a vagina. And you saw a little bit of the breast that defecates in that. But again, it's rephotographed, so people didn't really understand. What's really funny is they let some pretty crazy footage go through even the priests, because they actually didn't understand what was going on. Through the rephotographing, it wasn't just missionary. It was a breast defecating and somebody eating it. So they didn't quite understand that concept, so they let a lot of stuff go. And actually on some of the Blu-ray editions or the UHD editions coming up, we'll show the uncut, unprocessed footage of the puppets. They're all puppets. They're pooping, lots of pooping. And, so we'll show the weird pooping intercut with the rephotograph stuff. You can actually see Dan's work unadulterated to see his full poopin' value.
The poopin'.
Yeah, the poopin' edition.
Already very excited for that, actually, to see that, obviously. When you do so much experimenting, actually, and sometimes the outcome, maybe you can guess what it's going to look like, or you have some kind of experience what it might look like, or hopes what it should look like. But you also have a very, very striking color palettes, actually, in your films, and this does not seem to be, just a coincidence what just came out. So with Possessor, I was really taken aback at the first time when I saw it that it's so yellow. Can you tell us a little bit about the colors of your films?
We work out things quite a bit in advance during testing in terms of how the color is going to be working. Every color has a meaning. Everything has sort of a symbol towards something we're going across. Even though we're feet on the ground atheist people, we like weird sort of symbols hidden within some of the visuals, not esoteric stuff, but more psychological things. You know, the lighting is always psychological. Everything is a reflection on what is going on in the character's scenario and situation. So the colors sometimes are a radical sort of explanation of what's going on in the character's psyche, or we just see it when we're over there and then we build upon it. Like in Infinity Pool, for example, we had a lot of location problems over there for various reasons at the tourist resort. And at night, because it was such an insane place, they would put this electric blue lighting just in the bars at night. And when we had to change locations at the last minute for the sequence where Mia Goth is speaking with Alexander Skarsgård, she's sort of explaining the process, and you have this like crazy blue light and these pillars over there. We're like, ah, fuck. We, that morning, I think, saw the new location, like, what are we gonna do? And I guess we'll make it fucking blue, won't we? You know, a lot of times, you know, it's practical scenarios like that where color becomes an issue, but you know, in Possessor, for example, the red combined with the yellow was multiple tests done years before we shot Possessor just to find the right color combo of something that expressed the emotion and the psychological sort of feeling of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, Karim and I will spend a long time before, once there's a script, but before we have actors, before we have sets, before we have anything, we'll do a kind of theoretical shot list together. You know, we'll spend a very long time just imagining what it could be, and that's a way to talk through, you know, what's the visual language of the film? You know, how, okay, you know, with Possessor there are two worlds. There's, you know, when she's inside somebody's body and when she's outside of someone's body, and the outside world is where she's less comfortable in her own skin, so that, you know, becomes sort of handheld and sharper. You know, how do we distinguish these two worlds? It's very helpful. A lot of that's planned just in that way, and then once we start bringing other members on, and once we start doing, you know, actual practical tests, we discover something like the yellow in Possessor. It came from the effects we were doing when, you know, with the lens baby and wiggling fingers and flaring lights. You know, there was a sort of a pretty yellow, even without a yellow filter. There was a kind of yellowness to the way it would flare the lens, and then we were sort of enhancing that, and then that became the color, and so we sampled that yellow for the title cards, and it started with this camera effect. And that's one of the reasons that practical effects are so much fun. You just stumble on this look, you know, this thing. You have an idea. Suddenly that becomes the color of the film. Suddenly that's the poster. That's, you know, but it just started with Karim and I wiggling lights in a lens and waving our fingers around, you know, and you just sort of run with it.
Yeah, and there's also a bit of a giallo vibe in Possessor, so I suppose it makes sense that the titles are yellow. You know, giallo, of course, being the title of yellow in Italian, that a lot of Italian horror movies, because the books they were based upon or inspired by had yellow jackets on them, that they call them giallo films. And you know, Possessor is kind of a giallo, in a sense.
So I would now like to invite you all. Can we have the light for the audience, please, so that we can see you, all your beautiful faces? Great, thank you.
Oh shit, most of you stayed. Wow, that's pretty cool. Thank you. I know it's long. Sorry.
So we have a mic, of course. Here is a question.
Well, thank you very much for the long and informative talk. When you were talking in the beginning about the MPAA and stuff, I was wondering, because I don't think in Antiviral, but in Possessor and in Infinity Pool, you were shooting with kids on the set. How is the process with so much blood and defecating breasts and stuff?
It's great. No, I mean, the kids, so it's two things. First of all, you do go through this whole process of, you know, you contact a child psychologist. It's all there's a very rigid framework when you're dealing with kids and the kids' parents, and making sure everybody's aware of what you're going to be, what the film is going to be, and also what you're doing on set. It's very, the process of getting there is very rigid, and there's a framework there for kids specifically. It's very, very codified. But the thing is, kids, like, when you're shooting that stuff actually on set, I know that the scenes end up looking disturbing, but the process of shooting it is just really funny and fun because it's just like you're getting those those few frames or those couple of seconds, and that's the horrible part, and you're putting those moments together, and so it feels brutal. When you're actually on set, it's just like playing Halloween, and they love it. They love it. It's all this fake blood everywhere and fake knives, and they're running around and having fun. So it's not this weird thing where you're having to protect them. They actually really enjoy it because it's just ridiculous. It's like fake arms flailing around everybody. It's like Rossif in Possessor with this third fake arm, and it's like everything's so ridiculous. Dan's off camera with his pump, and he starts pumping, and then Rossif is like getting ready, and then it's like action, and he goes, "Wah!" And then it's like cut, right? And then it's just, you're getting those few seconds. So the kids, both of whom were professional actors and really great, had no problem with the blood at all. We overcompensated, and we're very careful to say, okay, this is going to be a bloody room, it's fake blood, come on, it's Halloween, whatever, but they just were way more cool with it than than a lot of the adults even,
Yeah, particularly Christoph in Infinity Pool, the kid who does all the stabbing, he was like super into the stabbing. Like, he wanted to have Dan do inserts, and Christoph is like, I want to stab.
Yeah, Christoph was an amazing stabber.
Yeah, Christoph, good stab value.
Do we have more questions? Yes, first. Okay. Here comes the. Okay,
Hi.
here.
First of all, thank you for the very interesting talk, and thank you very much for your fantastic films, which
thank you
are really great. Kind of expanding on that question in regards to set safety. Considering the very explicit nature of your films, do you work with intimacy coordinators, and what's your experience in that regard?
So on Possessor, no, it was sort of before intimacy coordinators became a standardized thing. So Possessor, we didn't have one. Infinity Pool, we did have one, and it was a really great experience. Casey Hudecki was our intimacy coordinator. On that, I found it really useful, actually, because we had all of these. So it's this group of like eight actors plus their body doubles, plus there were some other actors in the film that had nude scenes. And so the thing is, even in the pre-intimacy coordinator days, in like with Possessor, you have to have these talks with the actors and be, if you're doing it right, you're very careful to explain to them exactly what's going to happen, what the shots are, to talk with them, make sure that their boundaries are respected, to, you adjust the scenes if there's something that they're not comfortable with. So you have those or in the past would have those conversations with the actors directly and really sort of map out the scene collaboratively with them to make sure everybody is comfortable, everyone knows what the camera angles are, everything that's going to happen. To do that with 20 people while you're also directing a hectic film would be really hard. So I found it to be incredibly useful to have someone whose job was just to focus on having those conversations, and then we could design the sex scenes and choreograph. It's all very choreographed. It's like a dance, right? It's not. It's very well planned. So to be able to do that. With she could come to me with like a spreadsheet of like all of the actors' boundaries and like what they felt comfortable with, what they didn't feel comfortable with, and we could devise a sex scene that would accommodate everybody. And
yeah, I mean, Infinity Pool was a bit like an Olympic game for an intimacy coordinator because there's so much sex in it, and she's wonderful and not the kind of intimacy coordinator that. Is very collaborative. Like some people are afraid of intimacy coordinators. They're like, they're going to take over my job. And no, she's like incredibly collaborative and I think made everybody's job a lot easier. And prior to that on Possessor, the intimacy coordinator was basically Rob, the first AD, and the costume department and the makeup department. They all kind of mutually did that job.
Yeah, well, in terms of locking down the set.
Yeah.
So you'd have like, especially the costume designer making sure, and Rob making sure that the sets are closed, that nobody comes on, and, But the designing of the sex scene is sort of more of a direct thing. Yeah, Casey did the orgy in The Boys season 3. She's really, she's really good.
Thank you.
So, wir hatten eine Frage, genau, dort hinten.
In Infinity Pool, the dog scene, how do you come up with that?
And how do you stop being afraid of what people might think of you for coming up with that?
Why? What do they think of me?
I don't know. I would be maybe scared that people would think I'm weird if I write something like that.
The thing is, if you grow up and they've always thought you're weird, I think you don't have the fear because it's too late. You know, the dog scene. I don't know. It just seemed to make sense at the time. I like this idea that there was this horrifying, animalistic, alternate version of him. I like the sort of S&M aspect to it, and the sort of, in some ways, Infinity Pool is about what happens when you strip away civility from people, and that kind of contrast between this postured civility and the kind of animal impulses that we all have beneath the surface. What happens when you when there are no consequences to keep people in check, and this animal side comes out. And so the dog was very much about this sort of it's a mirror of James in many ways. Once that's completely stripped away, once he's just a pure animalistic self. And so
But I think also the dog scene, other than, like people going, oh, you might be weird, I think some other people are like, finally I could go to the cinema with my slave, which happened at one screening of Infinity Pool. Where was it? I think it might have been in Latin America. Somebody suddenly posted on social media a woman with her dog man slave, where they finally had a movie to go to, and to go to their seats, he was in a dog collar, crawling to his seat, and at the end of the movie, while the credits were rolling, they left. He was crawling. She had her dog, and it was like, if you only reach 2 people, and give them just their movie, it's cool. So, some people might say you're weird, and other people might say, finally, I can go out in public as I really am.
I should also say I walked Alex personally at a number of screenings. He insisted on being walked. It wasn't my idea. And so throughout the promotions, he was like, okay, collar me, I'm going in. And so I would walk him.
I think you also collared me at the premiere in Berlin. Or was this Sundance? Sundance, I got collared.
Karim got collared.
I got collared at Sundance. Yeah. We're not weird. Exactly.
That's the thing.
This is just Berlin behavior. We're acting like Berliners everywhere.
Wir hatten eine Frage, glaube ich, gleich daneben, ne? Also genau, da in der Mitte gleich, die in derselben Reihe.
Eine kurze letzte Frage.
Ja gut, eine kurze letzte Frage. Last question, so.
Hi, I have a question regarding the movie Possessor. In the movie you briefly touched upon the topic of data mining. And was it more like a vehicle to show that, like, Sean Bean is making his son-in-law do like a demeaning job, or were trying to tell us something different with it?
Sorry, I missed just the first.
Data mining.
Oh, data mining. Yeah. That was that sequence. Structurally, yes, he's trying to make him do a demeaning job, but it was very. I wrote that during the Snowden leaks, and I was extremely angry at the time about the death of privacy, and so it was intended as satire at the time. This incredibly invasive thing for an incredibly mundane reason, which is money, which is very much the case thematically. That was the reason for that scene. Hilariously, I mean, it was supposed to just be a joke. That wasn't supposed to be reality. I mean, the thing is, the sci-fi in these films, it's not really meant to be predictive sci-fi. It's not usually about what the future will be. It's an alternate, exaggerated world. So I made that like, okay, haha, it's a joke. And it's totally come true because, first of all, Meta, in promoting the metaverse, they make their employees have meetings in virtual reality. So they actually have these VR headsets. They go into VR offices. That was meant to be a joke, but it turned into reality. And then also the AI thing, interestingly, AI is very good at recognizing things in images, but only because people have trained it to do that. And so there are these companies that employ huge numbers of people to go through images on the internet and just point out, okay, these are curtains, these are blinds, this is a car, this is a dog, and you need to do that to train AI to the point where it can start recognizing itself. So, yeah, everything in that scene became horribly true, in time.
So I'm afraid, unfortunately, this really was the last question. So Brandon, Karim, thank you so much for being with us. It was really an honor having you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having us.
Yeah, really, thank you so much for having us. Thank you to Slash Film.
Yeah.
Slash Film forever.
Yeah, we've had a really wonderful time, so appreciate the chance.